Hey guys, Tim here. Spec Technology is going to break down a gun today. We're trying to reduce our face-to-face training time. No offense to you guys, but with this 2020 coronavirus thing going on, we're just trying to take some precautions. So I've already unboxed this gun. This is a Graco Fusion AP. The 2 stands for a 52-52 mixing chamber, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. They give you directions, some parts for connecting the gun to the hoses, pin vise, screwdriver, nut driver, grease gun, another warning thing there. And we're going to get into this gun pretty quick. It's going to be good that we have a video. You guys can go back and look at it over and over. And hopefully this will help reduce some downtime for you. I'm going to reposition this camera so I can start breaking this thing down and you guys can watch and see how it's done. All right, guys, we'll see how this goes. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, there's not much that you can break on this gun taking it apart. Primarily, there's a few things that you could lose. There's a few things that I surely wouldn't want you to damage inside the gun, so we'll show all that to you. We'll break this gun down to the very last O-ring. So the first thing I'm going to start with, this is your gun block. When you get your rig, this gun block's already going to be in the trailer. This nut driver takes this block off the gun. And what we do is we take these 2 fittings off of here. There's your A side right there. There's your B side right there. These fittings come off. They'll be in your bag of goodies when you get your trailer with your gun in it. And we attach actually a whip onto here, a 36-inch stainless steel braided whip that has our own adapter on the end of it that goes to the main spray hose. So these come off, and again, you're going to have the whips on there. These are your needle valves, basically. This lets material in and out of your gun. It's 3 turns. This is not a He-Man contest. You don't have to open these or over-tighten them. They are precision. If you ever have to get into here, you can actually take that nut off right there, get into the block, take out these plugs on either side, get into the block, and you can also take off your hose, get into the block. Again, this, once we pressure up the system, you're going to have about 12 to 1500 psi behind these valves. So make sure that these valves are closed before you take the gun and the block apart, because you'll get shot right there out of those valve holes. Here's the front end of the gun. This is called the air cap. If you notice, this air cap is flat on the bottom side and chamfered on the top side. This keeps you from being able to over tighten this cap. When the gun's all foamed up, it's real nice to be able to stick a screwdriver back here and take this cap off. You notice this cap has 4 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're spraying, there is a valve right here, a needle valve on top. Okay, I call these the horns, kind of like horns on a bull. This needle valve comes out, and what this does, you don't have to take it out, but you loosen it. And that introduces air into the front end of this gun. That air goes in through these 4 little holes right here, 2, 3, 4. And I think primarily what it does is it keeps the overspray down. It kind of puts a ring of air around it that keeps the overspray down. No O-rings here. You can throw this right in Pura, and we'll cover that in a minute, what Pura is. It's a solvent that breaks down cured foam. All right, so what happens is you have your block. Of course, your gun block is on the gun, oriented this way. Material comes in. These are called check valves. That's a check valve right there. It's got a little ball bearing in there that's held in by a spring. If you notice everything on this gun, if you can see that little A right there, there should be an A here. There's an A there. There's also a side seal in here, a side seal cartridge that has an A on it as well. So if you look at this gun like you're spraying with it, it's just like looking in the back of the trailer. Everything on the left side is A, everything on the right side is B. So these check valves, they pop out. Every single piece of this gun comes apart so you can clean it. Get your little screwdriver up under there, pop this thing out. You can use a little pair of needle nose. You have an O-ring that sits here that actually seals that to the block. This whole check valve will pop out. So what I try to do is I make it a habit, since everything on the left is A and everything on the right is B, I'm going to pop this out over here on the B side, and I'm going to pop this out over here on the A side. So if I need to clean them, we can use some brake cleaner, something like this right here. If you need to clean them, you know, you're going to have your gloves on. Try not to cross-contaminate. Don't touch this check valve and then touch that one and then touch this one. You're going to start making foam. But you can clean these check valves, a little bit of brake cleaner, kind of loosen it up. I call it neutralizing it. You're going to neutralize the check valve. And what this check valve does actually is if you cross the gun over and material shoots across the gun and tries to go backwards into the hose, that's your last resort on keeping material from crossing over into the other side of the hose. Each side has a pair of screens. These are number 80 screens. Sometimes they're a little pesky to get off. In your kit, if you bought the O-ring kit from us, we have 60 screens. Our philosophy is anything that'll fit through a 60 will blow through the tip of the gun. So the 80 is just stopping stuff that potentially is just going to slow you down during the course of your job. So your screen comes off. Again, this is our A side. Back end of this has a little screw that comes out. And remember what I said earlier, there's not much you can damage, but there's some things you can lose. So if you look at this, there's a little screw type thing that holds that together. You have a spring and you have the ball. If you lose any one of those, you do not have a check valve system anymore. You can still spray, but if you cross over, you're going to be in a bunch of trouble. B side's the same exact thing. What I have to tell you, because of viscosities, and a lot of times the B side does not get junk in it. The A side will crystallize. It's moisture sensitive. So if I was working on a gun that I'd already sprayed with, I'd absolutely be wearing gloves. Otherwise, my fingers would be black and my hands would be black, and it would take a couple days for that to wear off. But going back to the viscosity, traditionally, A side is about 350 centipoise. B side is anywhere from 1,000 to about 1,200. So right out of the gate, you have two dissimilar viscosities or thickness trying to get through the rig. A lot of my guys, they won't use a screen on the B side at all because they don't want to impede the flow of material through the gun. Like I said, the B side normally won't give you much trouble. The A side, because it crystallizes in the drum, sometimes in the hoses, in your supply lines. If any of that breaks loose, the 60 mesh screen should catch it before it gets into your mixing tip. Again, you can take this screen off if you'd like to, saves you a little money. Plus, we don't get much junk in that side of the gun. So right now, we're just going to set these aside. We're going to go back to reassembly of these in just a minute. This piece here, this is called, well, let me back up here. So what happens is that material comes in, pushes through the check valve, and there's a little hole right here, okay, that feeds the front of the gun. It's diagonal. You'll see it in a minute. It goes inside the front of the gun where the side seals are. Make sure that's clean when you're cleaning your gun. If you have pressure issues and you think your gun is clean, you might have missed actually cleaning that little tiny porthole right there. Okay, so material comes in, goes through that porthole. We'll take this retaining nut off. There's a Teflon O-ring in there. You can see that. That Teflon O-ring, you can throw this in Pura. The Pura won't give it much trouble unless it sits for days and days and days and days. Again, going back to the markings, there's an A. There's an A right there on that side seal, and there's nothing on that side seal. That tells me that's the B side. If by chance you're out on a job and you have two Bs and your A side's all junked up, as long as that B side is super clean and greased and spotless, you can use it on the A side. Everything mirror opposite on this gun basically does the same exact thing. Again, same thing here. We can use our little flat screwdriver, poke this thing out, should pop right out. Again, I'm going to put this on the A side of my desk, put that over there, pop out the B side, and we'll stick that over here on the B side. Now what happened here when I pulled this cartridge out, the spring was actually left in there. So we'll pull the spring out of there. There's the spring, and the side seal was left in there. So make sure that these are all three pieces are here when you put this together. This side seal is super, super, super polished. That is polished about as fine as they can possibly polish that. So is the mixing chamber down inside of here. So in review, real quick, your material comes in, it swirls, it goes through this diagonal port, that little diagonal port there. It swirls around here between the two O-rings, and it enters in these holes at about 1200 psi, enters into those holes, okay, and it goes through this hole, which that face is sealed against that chamber. And that chamber has a little tiny, tiny, tiny little porthole in it, right about there. I don't know if you can see it with the camera, with the angle, but there's a little porthole. That's called the impingement port. And what I said earlier when I was referring to the gun as being a 52-52, that port right there is 52/100ths of an inch. That allows about 13 to 15 pounds a minute through this gun. This front end is a 60-60. So the two most popular mixing chambers is a 52-52 and a 42-42. This is the fluid section. Again, there's parts here that you don't want to damage. So we're going to take this off gently. Okay, that just unthreads, and this mixing head comes off of here. You're going to see in this mixing head, or the fluid section, there's an O-ring sits right here, goes around the inside of this to create a seal. There's also one in the back, sits down up underneath this lip. If you put this back on the gun and plug in your air, and you have a lot of air coming out between here and the chrome of the gun, that means that that O-ring is bad. All right, so there's your fluid head assembly. Don't stick a screwdriver down in there. Remember, that's a cylinder. Okay, if you scratch that cylinder, this side seal right here is not going to properly seal in there, and you're going to end up leaking out all around the edge of this thing or leaking into the gun. That's how you get crossover a lot of times. You have a scratch on this side, maybe a little scratch on that side. The material mixes in the head. Now you've got foam all inside of this block that you got to try to clean out. And then still you have a scratch block. So use a nylon brush. Your kit comes with some brass brushes that actually fit this thing. And again, that port, so you can see it, comes right in through here. If I can find it, lickety split here. There it is. You can actually see it right in there. Just make sure that that's clean when you clean this blockhead. Not a whole lot more to this. Again, you can put this needle valve right back in there. I don't know a lot of guys that spray with that thing open, but if you open it just a little bit when you're spraying, you'll without the block being open, you'll feel air come out around the mixing chamber. And I think it also helps clean the tip of this a little bit. So this is your mixing chamber. These are about $165 these days. And what you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, there's some printing engraved on the top of this chamber. This says AR 5252. A stands for air, R stands for round, and 5252 are the size of the impingement holes. This surface is polished just like the surface of the side seal. So if you look here, what happens is when you pull the trigger, okay, you pull the trigger, the mixing chamber slides back and those holes line up. That 1,200 pounds of pressure on each side mixes in this little ½ inch of space and comes out that tip. Okay, if you don't have a good pattern, there's three things that'll give you a good pattern. Heat, pressure, and a good mixing chamber. If you have heat and you have pressure and you're sure you've got equal pressures on each side or pretty dang close, I take a good look at this mixing chamber right here. The other thing to point out is that if you scratch this, if you get a scratch on there and you go and you open the valve on the bottom of the block, open one of these valves, and you get a mist out of the tip of the gun, you get a mist out of the tip, that means that you either have a scratch on the chamber or you have a scratch on the side seal, and the fluid is taking the path of least resistance. And what it's doing is the air is picking it up and putting the material through that little hole and out the tip. So if you open a valve and you see material, a mist come out, and you know it's not water, you know your dryer's working, everything's working, you probably have a scratch on your chamber. So that's pretty much the front end. It's not too crazy. It's not too scary once you know it. You have drill bits in your kit. So this looks like a 5252 tip drill bit. And this right here is a 5252 impingement port. So you'll have two different size drill bits. This is, I think, for the nose, the 6060. And we've already broke off probably the 5252 or 42. That used to be a drill bit, but that would be used to clean the side. So keep this with you. This is your #1 tool when you're spraying. You might spray, 20 feet of a wall, then you have to move your scaffold. This tool right here, what I would do while my helper's moving the scaffold or before I start spraying, is go ahead and just ream this in and out of there. You can put a little bit of torque on it, kind of get the sides and the top and the bottom clean. A little bit of round motion there. Just to get any residual off the inner walls of the mixing chamber itself. So this, wire brush, a razor knife, probably your three most used hand tools while you're spraying. All right, we'll set this stuff aside. We'll be back to it in just a minute. This is the gun handle. You probably won't be into this handle very often. I know guys that might be in that handle once every other year. If you cross the gun over, let's just say you crossed over, and the #1 way that happens is you run out of material. So you got 1,000, 1,200 pounds here, you got 1,200 pounds coming in here, mixing in the mixing chamber, coming out the nose, you run out of material in the trailer, one side goes to 0, the other side's still 1,200. It's going to try its best to cross over in this gun. I've seen it cross over so badly it fills this entire chamber. And it actually, I'll show you the port in just a minute. There's a crack right here. This is engineered, this space. But I've seen the foam shoot backwards into the gun handle, into the trigger assembly, 30 feet up the air hose. I've seen it happen on the air hose, and I've seen it happen on the fluid hoses. These fluid hoses here that are attached, if the check valve didn't catch it quick enough. So this is your last resort for crossing over. But you cross the gun and the handle over, it's going to be a good bit of work. I always suggest the redundant thing to buy would be a second gun. Some of my customers do that right out of the gate. Sometimes they call me a couple weeks later and they want a second gun. Again, not much here to break, but there are parts to lose. This little back piece here. All right, this back piece right here, this is called the safety. And all this is clockwise. Of course, when this is tight, clockwise is the safety, counterclockwise is the spray position. And how that works, there's a little crossbar in here, and that little crossbar basically stops the air cylinder from coming back. If you notice the position on that, okay, that's safety, that's spray position. I did one time get stumped for about an hour. I had a guy ship me a gun back. He crossed the gun over badly. He took this bar off. It's actually threaded onto here, but he took this crossbar off and he flipped it over, and it changed the tolerance by just about a 1/16 of an inch, and that would not let the cylinder come back all the way. It looked functional. I could see the cylinder coming back, but it just wasn't coming back far enough. So we'll set that aside and be back to that in a minute. This is your air cylinder. Okay, you'll see that it is, it's got two flat spots in it, a flat spot down here and a flat spot up here. You can actually spin this thing around any orientation that you want to, as long as it fits into the flat spots. If you push it in, you'll hear compression. Okay, you'll feel compression when you push it in and out. This should be thoroughly greased. Make sure you have plenty of grease on this. There's a couple of O-rings here. You can see them on the piston itself. Inside the gun, guys ask me a lot of time, what are all those holes? My best guess, it makes the gun lighter. I don't know any mechanical reason why it's there, but to make the gun lighter. So there's 3 ports in this thing, and there's 2 back here, and they actually go down into the trigger chamber. There's one here, and there's one here, okay? The pesky one is right here. And this comes at a 45-degree angle, and it makes a turn right about here, and it comes all the way down the handle to that plug. Okay? If you cross the gun over, and Graco, you know, they recommend as well using this gun grease right here in this grease gun, using the gun grease, but I've seen the gun grease pick up residual material off of the mixing chamber and actually pushes grease back down into that little port. And what it does, it collects right there at that 45-degree turn, and if you hook air to the gun and you're not getting air out of the nozzle, so you've got your gun all back together, you're not getting good air out of the nozzle, odds are that 45 is junked up with garbage. Okay, the other thing that makes your gun sluggish is they have this other plug. It's the muffler, and there's a screen in here. And after you've been using the gun for a while, junk builds up on that screen because the air blows out that way. So if you trigger it and the gun is lagging and it's slow, again, you either have something stuck here. Okay, this is going to dictate up top here where that 45 is. That's going to dictate how much air you have coming out the front of the gun. This is going to dictate how much air exhausts out of the gun. So if you trigger it and it just doesn't seem like a brand new gun anymore, take this screwdriver. Well, take this out. You can just take your adjustable wrench, pop that out, take this screwdriver and pop that screen out of there and throw it away. I have guys that just take these off and throw them in the box and they never use them again. This is your trigger assembly. Use your little adjustable wrench, and we're going to go right back to something that you can lose. I'll show you what you can lose here. If it's in here, we might have stole it. We've had a little spring shortage. But there's that spring. Always falls out at the most inopportune time in the grass, in the sand, in the dirt, when you least expect it. So keep an eye on that screen. We're going to push the trigger out of here by taking our little tiny flathead screwdriver. It takes a little bit of pushing. But get on the nose of the cylinder and push this right out the back. Okay? I call this your trigger spool. There's a few holes in it. Just make sure they're clean. If you want to study how this trigger works in regard to all the holes that are in here, so these all just, this decides which air hole comes in and escapes out of. Never really studied it, never really cared. I just make sure that it's clean. These O-rings are a little bit pesky to put on. A little bit of grease. You can get these things on there. They're pretty flexible. But again, you're not going to be in this gun a whole lot unless you cross it over. Here's a #1 warning I can tell you. Do not take a screwdriver. Do not take anything abrasive and try to get foam out of here. If you cross the gun over, you're going to want to soak this handle in Pura and use a nice fine brass brush or round brush that comes in your kit and try to clean this cylinder out. Again, if you scratch this cylinder, just like the cylinders on your mixing head, you're going to end up with a bad trigger. You're going to throw away an $800 handle, and that's not a good thing to do. So there's the gun handle. There's the gun, all the parts. We're going to reassemble this in just a minute. I'm going to show you some tricks on the most favorable way to put it back together, and we'll get right back to this in just a minute. So you pretty well want to do this in reverse order. If you look at the trigger spool, one end of this trigger spool is round, the other end is flat. That's where that spring sits in there. Keeps this trigger all the way forward after you squeeze the trigger on it. So you're going to want to pop this thing in the back end of the gun, put a little bit of grease on it. They give you some grease. Used to be white lithium grease. Now it's more like Vaseline. I don't know what they changed over to there. Go ahead and put some grease on it. Push that in. Take your screwdriver and push the trigger all the way forward. As far forward as it'll go, you'll see the trigger handle will kick out. Okay, that means you have it all the way in. Take your little spring, the one that you didn't drop in the grass, hopefully. Stick it in this back end of this air chuck piece here. Go ahead and thread that back on there. A little greasy now. Hold on. Let me get it in there. Okay, thread that in. Again, you don't have to He-Man tighten this, just snug it up. Your little adjustable wrench, give it a little snug. That's it for your chamber. Again, go ahead and put your air cylinder back in here. Make sure it's got some grease. You're going to spin it around. And what you'll notice here, let me show you something interesting. That little purple dot right there, that's a official Graco O-ring. The full rebuild kit for a Fusion gun, as I understand it, I don't buy them, but they're about 120 bucks plus or minus. The O-ring kits that you have in your tackle box O-ring package, those kits are about $15. We call them the bootleg O-rings. You'll see that. You'll see it here on this cap as well. You'll see that little purple dot on the O-ring. That tells you it's a genuine Graco part. Again, there's your safety. We're in safety position now. That's it for your handle. And like I said, the number one thing that happens here is grease can get shoved down inside of this crack back into that 45. I've got a 1/8 inch, 12-inch long drill bit that we use to clean the handle. But you got to get the trigger spool out of the way. So you have to pull that out to be able to take this plug out and get this drill bit up inside of here. So you'll clean that 45. You'll clean that at a 45. You'll make sure that that's good and clean, and that should be your handle. Take your mixing chamber, and if you notice, I showed you before, you've got some printing on the top. But if that printing is wore off, you're going to notice on the back of the mixing chamber, a little notch in here. That little notch is on the A side. So if you just rub your finger back there, you're going to feel it. Make sure that you put this in numbers up or notch on the A side. It goes in one way. Give it a little twist so it's straight up and down with the gun. And you'll be ready to put your fluid section back on there. So again, here's your side seal cartridge. And pay very close attention to how these parts go back together. Trying to find my parts. Here they are. Okay, there's a spring. Here's a side seal. And drop your spring in first. Okay. And I use this little song analogy type thing, so you remember this. That group Queen had a song called Fat Bottom Girls. I just call this the little fat bottom girl. So always remember to put the little fat bottom down. And you'll be thinking of that when you start to rebuild your gun. Make sure that this side seal is springy. Okay, this will be springy for life. But when you put it in the fluid section, over time, when it's brand new, it's still springy. Out here, you'll see that it'll spring. But over time, it's just going to push in and it's not going to pop back out. So if that's the case, you get it pushed all the way in, it doesn't want to come out, do not take your screwdriver and put it on the face of the side seal. Do not put your screwdriver on the face. Put it on the cartridge. So stick your screwdriver in there against the cartridge and push that side seal out, and you'll be able to get that out of there. Okay? When you're putting this back together, if you put your side seals in just halfway, okay, partially, that's going to leave room in the middle for you to get this mixing chamber in there. So if you pop your side seals back in, okay, you put the horns up. Remember I showed you the horns. You're going to give this thing a little wiggle till it gets on there, and then you're going to thread this. And I've sat here before for, you see that? So it's cross-threaded. I've sat here before for 5 minutes trying to get this stupid thing to not cross-thread. And you'll laugh when you do it to yourself. You'll be thinking, oh yeah, Tim did that. So there's once. So I kind of just changed the torque on it a little bit, reposition it, and it'll catch eventually. So there we are. I think we're on. Yeah, we're on. The horns are up. If you notice here, on the way back, it grabs a little lock. Okay, it'll spin freely out here if I pull out. If I push back on it, I can hit the little lock, and then I know that I'm square on the gun. Tighten that down. Now I can push in my side seals. And like I said, you'll notice when it's brand new, they spring in and out. As the gun ages, especially the A side, it wants to just stay in, which is fine because your retaining nut is going to squish these in all the way to the bottom of the thread anyhow. So go ahead, stick that on there, get it started. You probably run into some resistance as it's squeezing those side seals in. There's your retaining nut, side seals. Here's your air cap. We covered the 4 holes in that earlier. Again, we're not going to over tighten this. This isn't a He-Man contest here. We're just going to tighten that down by hand. Take our little nut driver and give it a little 1-2 on there. So the only things we have left, again, pay attention to the orientation. There's no stamping on here, so this is known to be the B side. It's back together, already has a screw in the bottom. I'm not putting the screen on it. Pops in. A side, we'll go ahead and put this back together real quick. Okay, you got your check ball, drops down in there first. Won't fall out, okay? Drop your spring in there and put your little threaded nut thing in there. And then I like to just tighten these right to the top because I don't want ISO getting down into my threads. And you'll see that closer once you get your own gun in your hand. So that's wanting to cross thread a little bit on me as well. We'll back it up. Am I even in the spring? Yeah, I'm in the spring. In the spring. And it is spring. March 25th, 2020. Dealing with this crazy coronavirus stuff. Telling how long that'll last. Okay, like I said, I just tighten that pretty much flush with the top so I don't get garbage in the threads. And again, being the A side, we are going to want to use the screen on here. This is the 80. Like I said, in your toolbox, you have 60s. A little larger pattern, lets a little bit more junk through, which is fine. So there's my A side on the gun. There's my A side on the check valve. Make sure your O-rings are in there. One thing I will tell you, when you go to take the gun off of the hose, it doesn't do it now. They don't fall out now, okay? But when you take it off the hose after you've used them, somehow there's a little bit of pressure in there. And if you take the gun off the hose, don't walk with it this way. Don't walk with it that way. If you walk with it this way, you're going to get B side dripping over to the A side or A side dripping over to the B side. Now you're making foam in the threads, and that kind of sucks. Carry it this way because these want to pop out. They just, I don't know what it is. They just want to pop out, fall on the ground. Now you're dealing with it, picking up something out of the dirt. So take it off the hose like that, carry it like that. Again, if you're going to, once we've used the gun and you start taking everything apart, what I would do is this A side would get dropped over there. I would take my spray that. I'd spray down in here. Neutralize everything as you're taking it apart. When I take the cap off, I'm going to spray down in there. When I take the retaining nut off, I'm going to pop my side seals out, same way I showed you before. Side seal A on the A side, side seal B on the B side. I'm going to take my brake cleaner. I'm going to spray inside of the side seal cylinders. Everything that I open, I want to hit it with a little bit of brake cleaner to neutralize the product. That's about all I can tell you about this gun. Keep it clean. Let me show you a little trick here. Okay, well, you got to get the air cap out of the way. I think we got a little bit crooked there. Let me see if I can straighten this up. I've got a little trick. I'll show it to you later on what to do with this gun to keep it clean. Again, here's your drill bits that come with the gun. Here's your pin vise. You got a brand new pin vise here someplace. Yep, right here in this package. So you'll get that in the box. These will already be on the hose. You're going to have an air hose in there. These 90s they give you if you want to change the direction of the air of the gun. If you want to change the direction of where your material is coming from. If you want it to come out the bottom and then turn. But this is traditionally the way most rigs are set up. I don't know anybody that uses these. This dandy little thing right here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a hole down in there. It goes all the way through. In the back of the book, they actually have a diagram that shows you how to make a pressure pot, and you can flush your gun with this at the end of the day. So you put this bolt in here like so, and instead of having this bolt that holds the block on, you have this bolt that bolts to the bottom of the gun. I don't know exactly which orientation. I think that's the way it goes right there. There's no A or B marking on it, but what you're going to do is you're going to plug this end of the block, okay? You've got your hole in here that goes all the way through the block. So whatever you put in here is going to come out these two holes. So at the end of the day, what you do is you put this on your gun. I think that's, no, that's not the orientation. That's the orientation. You can see it there. Put this on the gun. You're going to have your pressure pot with about 20 pounds of pressure in it. You can put brake cleaner in it. You can put Pura in there, which is a urethane solvent. You can put mineral oil. You can put TSL. Anything that's not going to react with the ISO. You're going to leave your gun air hooked up. You're going to make sure that this is on here tightly and that you have fluid coming into it under pressure. And you're going to squeeze the trigger. Turn your safety off. Put your air on here again and squeeze the trigger. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull that mixing chamber back, and every place that fluid went, every place that spray foam went, your solvent is going to flush the gun through. So it's going to go through here. It's going to go through your check valve system. It's going to make that 45-degree turn. It's going to go into the side seals. It's going to mix in the mixing chamber, and it's going to come out the nozzle. And if you have any questions, feel free to call me. Like usual, a lot of my guys are, 99.8% of my guys are brand new. They've never sprayed anything before. They're just learning the process. We're very patient with returning calls. A lot of times, sometimes I'll tell you, just take a look at it and let me know your thoughts, because we're not in the field. But with FaceTime and WhatsApp and all these video sharing programs, you can show me anything on your gun. I can actually walk you back through it. I hope this video really helps you. Please feel free to refer back to it. And everybody stay healthy. Let me know how I can help you. Thank you, guys and ladies.